Welcome to Mastery Fractional CFO's Punchy podcast, short, impactful podcasts where I speak with business leaders from all walks of life and talk to them about business. I'm your host, Ryan Chenier. I'm the CEO and founder of Mastery Fractional CFO Services. And today I've got with me Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. Sarah is an entrepreneur and content creator with over 20 years of experience in supply chain. She founded the Let's Talk Supply Chain brand, and she's done a whole lot more. Sarah, you've got a lot going on. Tell us about who you are and what you do. Tell us about your business.
Hi, Ryan. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm super excited to be here. So Sarah Barnes-Humphrey, I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, which is a podcast and media brand in supply chain. I'm also the founder and host of the Blended podcast. It's a podcast about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And then also the founder of the Blended Pledge, which is a nonprofit where we give away grants to cover travel expenses so that diverse voices can say yes to speaking engagements. So we do have a lot going on. I've been in the supply chain industry for about 25 years. I don't want to age myself, but yeah, 25 years.
You started when you were 10 years old, right?
Well, kind of. I mean, when I was 16 years old, I was filing. Yep. Yes, I was.
Okay. How did you get into this, Sarah? I mean, I think if I recall from looking online, your family was in supply chain.
Yes. So we owned a freight forwarding company, which if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a travel agent for cargo. So your products need to move from one place to another. We were the people that did that. And so I kind of grew up in the industry. We talked about it at the dinner table since I can remember. And I went into the family business right after high school. I did all of my courses, college, university, trade certificates, diplomas by correspondence while I worked. I was reception and then went all through the company. I spent about 8 years in operations, 8 years in sales, and then I was director of sales and marketing. So spent a good 20 years at that company.
Okay. And then what you're doing right now, you've transitioned to something a little bit different. Tell us about the path that you took to get where you're at right now, and then tell us a little bit about what exactly it is you're doing right now in your own words.
Yeah, so I was director of sales and marketing, and we all know that we've got to be able to tell our brand story. And so one of the ways that I decided to do that was through podcasts. It was back in 2016. And well, I thought, and if anybody knows who Lewis Howes is, he's got the School of Greatness podcast. I was like, well, if Lewis Howes can do it, why can't Sarah Barnes-Humphrey? And so I asked a gentleman from my customs department to come and join me as my co-host. And my team and I, because marketing and supply chain was a little, I don't know, wasn't exciting. Let's just put it that way. And so we came up with a name. And so tongue in cheek, we called it Two Babes Talk Supply Chain. And we launched this podcast, and the first episode was awful. We got better as we went on every single episode. And we got 1,000 downloads overnight one night. And so I was like, we're on to something. And then in 2017, the family business ended up closing its doors. And I was out on my butt with nowhere to go after 20 years. But I had this podcast, and I had companies saying, come on the show. So I lost my co-host, I lost my team, but I kept the podcast going. And so I learned graphic design, social media, website design, you name it. I learned it all. I am not a graphic designer. Nobody will ever hire me to be a graphic designer. And if you go back to 2018, you're going to be like, I'm not sure what she was doing. But that's okay. That's where we all start, right?
That's right.
And then I started the Woman in Supply Chain series in January 2018. And by April, no women would come on a show called Two Babes Talk Supply Chain. So I rebranded it to Let's Talk Supply Chain, and the rest is history. And so now we're a media brand. So we do podcasts, we do live events, we create live shows for organizations that want to have regular thought leadership content. We do all sorts of different things under the media brand.
So who do you help? How would you define your ideal client profile or ideal customer profile?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of them, right? One is the audience that we serve. So that audience is reading, they're watching, they're listening to the content that we're putting out there. And so those are really supply chain professionals. When we think about Let's Talk Supply Chain and that media brand, it's supply chain professionals who are looking to stay on top of new trends, the news, thinking about what solution providers are out there when they have a challenge within their supply chain. And then on the other side, we have solution providers that are coming onto our show and talking about who they are, what they do, what they bring to the market, how they think about the market, their founder story, which is really important to a lot of people, and how they're making an impact on the industry. And so we've got those two as our ideal client profile.
Okay. If so, when you're working with in your business and you're doing what you do, how do people find you? How do they generally reach out to you, or how are you going and trying to find them? Tell me a little bit about that process, because it can be very different depending on the circumstances.
So we do a lot on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is kind of our jam. It's our platform. We've got a lot of followers on LinkedIn. So a lot of people find us on LinkedIn, whether they're on the audience side or they're on the solution provider side, because we put a lot of content out on LinkedIn. They're also finding us on Instagram and also through our website, letstalksupplychain.com.
Okay. All right. Now, if you were going to, let's pretend for a moment that you were going to give some supply chain solution providers some business insights or advice based on your experience and what you do. What would you want to say? What would be some things that you'd recommend that they consider, that they think about, maybe that they go to you to help them move things along?
Consistent content. Consistency is key. If they know that you're going to show up for them at a certain day and time and, with good quality content, you're going to build a good audience. You're going to build people who are going to come back and want to be part of that content. It's not salesy, it's educational, and yet they want to learn about your business. So you're putting it out there and you're sharing that founder story, who the people are behind the brand, and you're doing that consistently with the same message.
So you're working with these companies to produce and provide that content to their audiences, right?
To their audiences, to our audiences, we're kind of doing a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Okay. If a company comes to you and they're looking for this kind of content production, tell us a little bit about their journey with you. Like how exactly do you help them, and in what ways do you help them, and where could you take them? That kind of thing. Give us a kind of a good overview just to summarize, if you would.
Yeah, so it really just depends on what they're looking for. What are your goals? So that's one of the questions that we ask when we first get on any conversation with them. What are your goals? Are you looking for brand awareness? Are you looking for lead generation? Are you looking for consistent content? Are you looking to co-brand, for credibility? Like there's a lot of different reasons why somebody would partner with us for content. And it varies by customer, because lead generation and brand awareness are two very, very different things with different expectations and different outcomes. So we really want to understand what their goals are and what they're looking to do with the content that we create. Also, consistent content. Are they looking to produce something with us and then they want to take that and create different assets with it so that they can go and put that out there in different content formats? So really we want to know what that goal is.
So would you be working with a client like this over time, over the course of years, or is it more of a kind of a one and done sort of a scenario?
It really depends on what they're looking for in the goal. Some of them do come on the podcast one time, but we have a lot of reoccurring business and customers that come back every single time because of the quality and the process and the actual deliverables and outcomes that we provide to them to take back to their team to say, hey, this is what we produced. This is what it looks like. This is how many people we reached and how it converted.
Okay. Yeah. So let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say that there's a logistics company and they say, well, we need a little bit of brand awareness. We know that. And we need lead generation. We know that. We've got an in-house marketing team and they're doing some things, but we need somebody who can maybe provide some leadership and some coordination. Tell me how you'd approach that.
Yeah. So we would also go over and find out what exactly they are doing with their internal teams and what they're missing. What are some of those gaps, right?
Yeah.
What are the gaps that we can help with? And so from a brand awareness perspective, the podcast is always the best one to start with. Because on the podcast, we talk about their founder story, but then we also answer all of the questions as to why you would want to work with them as a solution provider.
Okay. And so if somebody's going to approach you and say, we really need help on the podcast side, you'd be working with them to parse out exactly what their value proposition is, maybe what
No,
their
I don't
competitive.
do any of that.
Oh, you
We
don't do
just
that. Okay.
produce the content. Yeah.
So they'd have to come to you with that, and then you'd be able to produce the content on a podcast using that material that they would provide you.
We actually write all the scripts.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think I'm getting a picture here. Okay.
Yeah, we write all the scripts. So it's really based on, we use their website, we use our initial discussion with them, but really we want to break it down so our audience understands who they are, what they do, real life examples of how they help their customers. Because at the end of the day, that kind of content helps the solution providers, but it also helps the community and the supply chain professionals understand who's out there and whether they're a good fit for them or not.
Right. Okay. What if you're look back at your experience in your career so far? What's one piece of advice that you've learned that about business that you could give to our listeners today?
Be yourself. It's too exhausting to try to be somebody else. So be yourself, right? Don't be any more or any less of what you can be. That would be it. You need to be authentically you, because you have so much to offer as yourself. And
Okay.
you'll get found out at some point if you're trying to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. That makes a lot of sense. Be authentic. That's pretty good advice. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners about your business, what you do, the value you provide? Anything else on that front?
Sure. I mean, we've talked a lot about Let's Talk Supply Chain, which is great if your listeners are in supply chain.
I'm a little,
But on the other side of the coin, our blended podcast is really for everybody.
okay.
And I just want to talk about that for just a minute because I
Yeah.
do a lot of work in diversity and inclusion. As you can see on my shirt, it says diversity matters in supply chain. But it matters in every single industry. And so I bring 5 different people from different walks of life together to talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So we talk about the tough topics, but magic happens because I'm not asking for experts. I'm asking for everyday people to share their perspectives and their stories. And we can all learn from that and bring it back to our teams to have real discussions in safe spaces around diversity and inclusion and what that means to us, what it means to the organization. And then further to that, we need to see more diversity on industry stages. So Blended Pledge, the nonprofit, if you know of anybody who has a speaking opportunity that needs help with travel expenses, please send them to the Blended Pledge. If you want to donate and help us raise money so we can see more diversity on industry stages, go to blendedpledge.org. And we're always looking for volunteers as well. So just wanted to thank you for giving me the platform and the opportunity to talk about what I do in diversity and inclusion, because it's a very important part of the work that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to get the word out. No question about it. Okay. Well, we've reached the point in the show where I give you the opportunity to ask me, a fractional CFO, any question that you may have.
I've been thinking about this for weeks, Ryan.
Okay. What do you got?
You told me to prepare for this, and I was like, I've been thinking about this for a long time. But being an entrepreneur, I kind of wonder, because sometimes you like wonder if you're asking the right questions or if you're overthinking something, or if the way you're thinking about something is right. So I want to know how I sort of fit in there. um when you think about entrepreneurs, is there anything when it comes to finances or as a CFO that you run into over and over and over again when you're talking to entrepreneurs about finances and expenses and profitability? Is there one thing that you think that entrepreneurs share and tend to overthink in that area?
It's a good question. And the answer is, to a large degree, it depends. Much like in your situation, it depends on the circumstances. But I think the common denominator is that most entrepreneurs, when they think about their finances, they tend to think about it in a simplistic way, and they think, "Gee, how can we cut expenses?" That's just a common thing. They're wanting to go through and let's cut expenses, and that's not a bad thing to do. But holistically, you want to look at your finances. You want to look at everything you're doing in your company, and expenses are only one part of that. Think of it like a pizza pie. That's only one slice of
Right.
pizza. Really, what you want to do is think about every dollar in your business. How are you using that to reach your goals, to achieve your vision of success? So some of those dollars you're going to be using on what you might consider an expense, but at the same time, it's really an investment to some degree in your business. If you've got a labor expense, and that's relatively large, that labor force is producing something in your business. And I would encourage entrepreneurs, I often encourage entrepreneurs to think more about how can we get a better return on each dollar that we're investing in our business. So for labor, for example, if you've got a large labor expense, you could potentially cut your staff, but that's going to reduce your ability to service your clients or to produce your products and provide your products to your clients. Another focus might be, how do we increase the productivity of the labor force? How do we increase the efficiency of the labor force? And that might be through a variety of different things. And you might be thinking about training and development. You might improve your processes. You might involve some systems. Artificial intelligence these days can help a labor force be more efficient, more effective, more productive. But these are things that might even add some expenses to your overall expense column. But at the same time, if you're looking to grow your business, you're going to want to look at doing that kind of thing, investing in the future. If you have goals for revenue increase, if you want to increase your sales next year, for example, we're coming to the end of this calendar year. So a lot of companies are budgeting for next year. You want to ask yourself, how much do we want to grow? And how are we going to hit our growth targets? It'll be required that we use our labor. It'll be required that we might, now that artificial intelligence has come on so strong, we might start looking at making some technological investments that'll return on those invested dollars. So it really is a more holistic approach, I think, would help people. If somebody's focusing too much in one area, that's where they're focusing, is how do we cut? But you really want to look at it from that larger picture perspective. And then at the end of the day, you're going to have your bottom line. I'm talking like an accountant here, but you've got your sales, you've got your expenses, and you've got your bottom line. To really simplify it, if your bottom line is doing what you want it to do and your growth targets are being achieved, those expenses, next year, when you're budgeting next year, you can say, hey, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What can we do better? But you always want to keep it in perspective within the big picture of the overall holistic view. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Because obviously being in marketing, a lot of times marketing is cut first. And for the most part, you actually need to invest more in marketing because everybody else around you is investing less.
So
And you want it to stand out.
yeah, no, for sure. And can I put you on the spot, Sarah? Because
Sure.
that's absolutely right. And I deal with that with my clients a lot. We're talking about the marketing budgets right now, as a matter of fact.
Mhm.
But to turn it around on you a little bit, what would you say to somebody who's saying, geez, I want to cut my marketing expense? Like, would you have a point of view or a suggestion with respect to that, or just some perspectives?
I would almost ask them the amount of questions and the same questions that you just asked about the labor force.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, if you go quiet and you're not investing in your marketing and you're not consistently out there, then people aren't asking about you. They've forgotten about you.
Right.
And so how does that help your sales? How does that help lead people to your website? There's this thing called dark social. And so all of the things and the activities that you're doing on a day-to-day basis to put your brand out there, regardless of what that is and what that piece of content is or that asset is, it's always coming back to you in ways that you actually can't see or measure. If somebody takes a post, or maybe they see something on Instagram, or maybe somebody mentioned you in a story, and that story is then sent to 5 people, you're never going to know that. But you're not going to be in the race if you're not there.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have that opportunity to be reshared in ways that you can't see or measure if you're not in the race, if you're not spending money on marketing, if you're not consistently out there.
That's a great point. And I'll add to that with clients in the past, I've seen that when you cut off the marketing expense, there's a real lag. There's a real, it takes time before you see the negative side effects of doing that. And so it is something to be
Ramping it back up.
ramping it back up. It takes time.
It takes time, energy, and money. And so
Yeah.
what would you rather? Negative effects and taking a long time to revamp back up? Or would you like to consistently put some money there and investment there? And also, when most of your competitors are cutting their marketing budget, why are you cutting your marketing budget to match them?
Yeah.
You want to be seen where they are cutting back and won't be seen.
It's a great time to gain some competitive advantage. I think that's a great point, Sarah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's good insight. Okay. Well, Let me ask you this. What's the best way for somebody to reach out to you and get a hold of you or your team with respect to anything you've talked about today or anything that you're doing at all?
Yeah. So go to letstalksupplychain.com or come and follow me on LinkedIn, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey.
Okay. Yeah, you've got great LinkedIn content. I've seen a lot of it, and I'm following you as well. So I recommend that also, and that's a great way to start to get to know more about your business. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today on our Punchy podcast. It's great to chat with you and get your perspective on things. And to our viewers out there, if this has interested you in any way, and you can think of anybody that might benefit from it, please forward it along to them as well. And unless Sarah, you had anything else you wanted to add before we close off for today?
Yeah, just want to say thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for being here. And that's it for our podcast today. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Goodbye, all.